Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree before you buy. Sekiro is hard,
Back to
but
another
it's not
episode
that
of
hard.
Before You Buy, the show where we give you some
Just
straight
learn
up
the
gameplay
patterns.
and our first impressions of the latest games releasing. The highly anticipated DLC for Elden Ring is here, and it is massive. Starting all the way back with the original Dark Souls, From has delivered with substantial add-ons that feel like an essential part of their games.
I beat it
I'm talking about
normally.
Stuff like Artorias of the Abyss, the Clown Trilogy, the Ringed City from Dark Souls 3, the Old Hunters from Bloodborne. These are like the platonic ideal of good downloadable content. And what I'm saying here is that Shadow of the Erdtree has a whole lot to live up to, especially when you compare it to how huge the base game is. Is it one of From's best add-ons or one of its worst? Let's get right into it. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on Game Rings, let's talk Elden Ring's DLC, Shadow of the Erdtree. I will
Falcon
try to keep
sounds
this
super happy
as
about it.
spoiler-free as can possibly be.
Yikes, drink
I'm only going
potion.
to show bosses and areas that exist in the trailers. It's not trailer footage that we're showing you, it's areas that were featured in the trailers, but still, there's a lot to see, and it does not make sense to show it to you.
That's
here.
probably a
Now, I
boss.
don't think I need to explain what Elden Ring is. If you're watching this, you probably already know.
It's not a
Souls,
boss.
but in an open
Not a
world.
named boss.
DLC, it's the same format as the base game. It's got an open world map full of little points of interest and legacy dungeons to explore. You start off in this mostly closed off area. It's called the Gravesite Plains, and then from there you're off to the races. Like usual, there's barely an explanation for what's happening or why.
Of
You're in
course.
the realm of shadow, some kind of strange alternative world to the main one, and you're following in the footsteps of the last shard bearer you didn't get to kill in the main game, the most precious of the demigods, Mikola the Kind. That's really all you've got to go on, and the plot is, as usual, pretty shrouded in mystery. Unlike
I beat this
previous
boss.
DLCs From is done, I will say this feels much more connected to the base game, at least on a story level. A lot of the NPCs you meet are servants of the various
yeah.
demigods you slayed in the main game, and the events
Okay.
going on in the realm of the shadow directly connect to what's going on in the lands between. So lore heads are probably going to go nuts for the DLC. It expands the story of Elden Ring in some pretty interesting ways. Getting here isn't as easy as just selecting DLC in a menu, though. You have to actually make significant progress in the main game to access the new content.
I've
For
already
whatever
beat it.
reason, this is just how From does their DLC. You have to find
Art
the
style
engine
of
somewhere in the game,
Elden Ring
and
is
if you haven't
fantastic.
completed the sometimes arcane requirements to get there,
Mesmerizing.
sorry, no DLC for you. It
Why I
does
played
make
it for
the
so
content
long.
integrates
I was stuck on
more
this game
naturally
forever.
into the main game. But if you just started a new
I was
game
playing this
plus
game
or
off
haven't made a
stream,
lot of
on
progress in the main
stream.
game, getting here is
Like,
going
it
to
was
take
just
a while.
a good
I mean
game.
a while. You got to get like 2/3 through this 100-hour RPG to even get a chance.
80 hours, thank you very much, Falcon.
Requirements. It's possible to grind
How
up
long
and
it took
skip
me.
through huge chunks of the main game so you can get to the DLC faster, but let me just say it right now, I don't recommend doing that. If you go into this thing unprepared,
You've
you're
yet to
gonna
play
get your
it?
ass kicked. I had to
should-
start a
you
new
should
game to
definitely
get
play it.
here, which is why
Golden
I've got such a scrubby
Hippopotamus.
set when I started the DLC. Yeah,
I don't
I'm using
remember
the
this
Bloodhound
boss.
Fang,
Is this a new
which,
one?
by the way, autocorrect wants to be Bloodhound Gang, but I'm not Siskel, I'm not Ebert. Do not give me 2 thumbs up
All right.
for this loadout. In my defense, I was in a hurry, all right? I was not ready. Even though you can get here earlier, this place seems meant for late game players. It seems like it pretty much expects you
Now I
to
can play it in the
beat
DLC
game
in one
for the
go.
most
As
part.
soon as you
That's
beat
what I'd recommend
Morg, I
if
think you
want
gotta beat
smooth experience,
Morg.
'cause it is super unforgiving.
or Mog.
From the start.
Can't
There's
remember
a few
his
ways
name.
to make things easier. Shadow
You gotta
of
find him
Erdtree
and beat him.
introduces a few new mechanics.
That's how you
The
gain
DLC
access.
exclusive,
A lot of people
and they
didn't even
can
know
help
that.
out immensely.
I was like, bro,
For instance,
you should
the
have been
revered
fighting
spirit
every
ashes that can make
every
your spirit
boss.
summon stronger, and even better, these things
Oh,
called
yeah.
scattered
I
tree
love the-
fragments, which increase
love the mimics,
damage
bro.
you do and lower the damage you
Yeah.
take the more of them you collect. The catch here is these bonuses only work in the DLC, so there's a progression track that can only be followed in the Realms of Shadow. It might be a little divisive, but I like how they're implemented personally. Scattered tree fragments are mostly found in churches and Michaelis crosses, which are sort of breadcrumb trails showing you the vague direction you're meant to go. As directions, they're not that useful, but it was always a relief to see them because the strength and defense boosts you get from these items are
Yeah, this
they're
has new
significant.
stuff. 'Cause
It's
I
a
don't
mechanic
know
that
anything
rewards
about
players for exploring the world. And even though the boost you get, it's small at first, it really starts to add up after a while. And you can make certain boss fights that seem impossible at first relatively tame once you have enough of them.
Yeah, I could
Like
beat
the base
Drake.
game, you can either follow the breadcrumbs or just explore and see what you can find. But what makes this area so different is that you start off in what is essentially the center of the map rather than one
Watch
end
out.
of it. given
Do the other
that,
foot.
one path quickly becomes 2, becomes 3, just spreads out from there. And the map here is a lot more vertical this time around, so you're constantly looking at spots and wondering how the heck you're supposed to get up there. Some people might find that frustrating, but I like the sense of discovery, looking around and trying to figure out how to get to some seemingly unreachable areas. The map might not look that big at first, but believe me, it's gigantic. The landmass is way bigger
It looks
than I
enormous.
expected. There are huge chunks of the area that are completely optional, too. Visually, pretty much on par with the original game, but the amount of love and detail that's gone into this new area, it is impressive.
That looks like a
Everything
trap.
just has this extra layer of visual polish on it. There's fewer spots that feel empty, and even if they are, there's visual storytelling all over the place. It gives you insight into these land and, you know, the freaks that live there. There are just some amazing vistas to find that'll make you want to stop and just stare out into the distance or marvel at some cyclopean sculpture. It's just a very cool world to look at. It's not technically impressive, but the art design is top notch, and that's what we've come to expect with these devs. One thing the standard game
The
gets
dragon
rightly
alive?
criticized
Oh,
for
there's
is
a
the
boss
quality
there.
of the side
There's gotta be a
areas
boss
or
there.
mini dungeons. You know, the many little tombs
Yep.
and mines you could explore in the regular game. They get filled out in the world,
There you
but
go.
once you've seen one mine, you kind of seen them all, and they do start to get a little repetitive after
they
a while.
do. Those
and
mines,
Shadows
I
of the
hate 'em.
Erdtree really tries to improve on that with new areas like jails and forges that are essentially just more tombs, but they're a lot more interesting to explore. They have unique enemies and challenges. They feel a little more substantial to explore, not just
That's
like
good.
repeating barren hallways and caves. They're actually dressed up to feel like they're almost at the level of the legacy dungeons, and that's a big improvement overall. Another thing
Cool with
that makes these places worth finding is they all almost have something new to get. There's loot everywhere. New weapons
I
and
saw that coming
talismans
from
and
a
armor
mile
sets
away.
are just falling into your lap, and a lot of these things have new animations or mechanics. There's just some amazing and powerful weapons to find here. And
Oh,
in
boy,
another
level up my
positive,
stuff,
this place
dog.
just showers you with smithing stones so you can actually upgrade all this stuff, which
Oh,
is
good.
good because, like I said, you basically need a maxed out weapon to get much done in this DLC. At level 1, trying to kill even the most basic chump soldiers is it's like trying to chop down a redwood tree with a pocket knife, which is sort of ridiculous, but that's Elden Ring for you. Speaking of enemies, there's a lot of new stuff here,
Yeesh.
but also there is a kind of
Got
disappointing
lucky.
amount of reuses. A lot of enemies from the base game appear here, and while some of them get new tricks, a lot of them are exactly the same. Another problem from the base game that rears its ugly head here as well, the parts where you're just sort of running by enemies. I'm not talking your regular old Souls walk back
what the heck is
after
that
getting
thing?
killed in a legacy dungeon area. I mean, the many open world areas where there's just a ton of random enemies wandering around, and you just ride the spirit stead past them. In the regular game, it was noticeable, but here it stands out even more because in general, the open world feels more designed and curated, and it's maybe smaller, more detailed in a lot of ways. So the parts where you're running through, avoiding everything, it stands out as awkward. For the most part, though, the Realm of Shadows is just a joy to get around. It's somehow even more non-linear than the regular game, with a lot of secret paths that can get you to certain areas and completely bypass certain bosses if you want. When I said there's big sections of the map that are optional, I really mean
That
it.
tapeworm?
Reaching those
Probably.
spots, which I feel kind of like they're secret. They're not secret, but they feel secret. It's some of the most satisfying exploration I've done in a game. It can't
I
be
would have
understated
never
just
even
how
seen
strange
that.
and interesting this map is. Like, it really went all out with the weirdness here. This DLC feels
There's a
like they're
boss
applying
there.
all the lessons
There's
they
a
learned
summoning
making
stone
Elden Ring,
next to
and
it.
the open world itself benefits from that the absolute most. It's also
I'll give it to
it's
Falcon. He
kind
cuts
of
it
a
off at the
mini-sequel. I mean,
perfect
this DLC
points.
is easily bigger than many.
Because the second a
full-price
boss is about to
Souls-likes I've
appear,
played.
he
Not
cuts
just
it
in
off.
terms of land mass,
'Cause I can
either.
tell
More
where the bosses
more
are gonna
dungeons, more
appear.
everything, and it's impressive as hell. There's definitely some of that classic from DLC bullshit here, though. For better or worse, might I add. There's a little more platforming and environmental challenges going on here. A lot of the nastiest traps aren't sequestered away in their own special tombs. There is some of the bullshit enemy placement, and probably don't like. There's
Yeah.
gotcha traps, infuriating
Of course.
snipers, and confusing
Yeah.
environmental puzzles all over the place.
Well, that's
it
normal.
makes each location feel unique, but it
Oof.
does get exhausting after a while, especially when you find yourself getting stuck. Look on the bright side, though. There is always
What
another
the
incredibly
hell?
hard place to go get killed at. The new
Oh
bosses,
my
which I'm not going to
God.
show a lot of, they are no joke. I'm not sure any of them are quite as hard as Millennia. There's new mechanics that boost your attack and defense, put you on more of an even playing
hit 'em.
field compared to her, but some of them
Run.
are definitely close.
Oh.
Do you love absurdly
Run.
long attack
Whoa,
strings that
dodge,
always
dodge,
seem to
dodge.
have
There you
one
go, hit 'em.
attack after you think they're over? How about
Run.
massive area
Get 2
of
hits.
effects that can trigger on a
Oof.
dime and are nearly impossible to dodge through. How about chaotic screen obscuring effects
Get him, get him,
that
get
make
him,
it hard
get
to
him.
tell what's
Oh, no.
going on? Oh yeah, and massive health bars on bosses.
He sounds
Kill you
like
in a single hit or
me.
two, and who attack so aggressively you
Hit him.
almost never get your turn to attack back.
Jump,
This
jump,
DLC's
dodge.
got all that,
Yeah.
and it's somehow even worse than you probably expected to be.
Acid.
I admit,
Yikes.
I used
I
these
hated
spirit
these.
summons to get through this one.
Of course.
Absolute maidenless behavior. I know.
Maidenless
But good
behavior.
lord, some of these
Nice.
bosses are brutal, and I had to use every advantage I could to beat some of these things. That's the DLC overall, though.
Ooh.
It's really tough.
Oh, wait,
especially
that's
early on.
next. We already
and
beat
if you're
him.
not rolling with the most overpowered equipment possible, it's very hard. But it's also
Oh
very
my goodness.
satisfying. It's
Better
easily
get up.
From's biggest DLC yet. It's probably one of the biggest of all time, like up there with Blood and Wine from Witcher 3.
Oh, I like
I
it.
think it's probably bigger than.
I mean, he's
this
basically
feels like
saying,
Elden Ring 1.5.
yeah,
both in terms
if
of
you
size
like
and
Elden
how
Ring,
overall
you
I think
will like the
is a
DLC.
more refined experience in the base game. As much fun to explore as the standard game was, playing this game really makes you understand how flat the terrain actually is. And after exploring 1 or 2 tombs in the base game, you've basically seen everything you're going to see there. This DLC is very different from that. Everything's special. It all feels handmade. Honestly, even when they're reusing
Nice.
assets. These guys are the masters of using and reusing.
He went with the classic
what
sword and
they
shield.
have.
I went with
and
the
while
dual
certain
katanas.
parts of Shadow of the Erdtree can feel familiar, there's a lot of big surprises here and some amazing areas and boss reveals that are easily some of the best in From history. So is this the best DLC From has ever done? Well, that comes down to taste, but just looking at what's here, it's the most fully featured DLC. It may not be as tightly designed as the old Hunters, which is arguably their best DLC, but it's definitely up there in terms of quality. It's huge, but it's not cheap. The base price is $39.99, and you do get your money's worth. You could probably
can
finish it in
imagine.
about 20 hours. Or
20
so,
hours? Yeah,
if you
that's
just
about
push right through the main path. But for completionists, you can easily lose 30 to 40 hours here
Yeah, I can see
or
that.
more. It can't be understated how big this DLC is. It's almost too big at times. There's one too many moments where the only interaction I was doing with the game was pressing forward and tapping the dash button to rush through a visually stunning but otherwise empty environment. But for me, not that big of an issue. I kind of like seeing more stuff. If the DLC had been something a little more dense, I think it probably
he's
would
about
have
to get
been the
crushed.
perfect DLC. But also,
40 bosses in this
nothing is
DLC?
perfect
For real?
per se, and very, very
Like named
very
bosses or
good
just bosses?
is more than enough. In fact, it's more than almost everybody else. If you're into Elden Ring, this DLC is pretty much
Told you.
essential.
Boom.
Highly recommended. Great.
Exactly what
That's
I
all
said.
for today. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription, so click subscribe. Don't forget to enable notifications, and as always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter, Falcon the Hero. We'll see you next
Falcon the Hero.
on Game Ranks.
Thank you, Falcon. Subscribe to Game Ranks. They make good gaming content.
I presume you, too, are keen to know just what kind Mikola is doing here.
Already has 5,500 reviews on Steam, rated 9 out of 10. I could see that. I mean, Elden Ring's a great game. You add a DLC that adds another 20 to 30, 40 hours in there. Of course you're going to get good reviews. It's a good game.